Hello, and you're listening to Your Majesty's Secret Podcast. I like my podcast shaken, not stirred. Only on the Four-Eyed Radio Network. If you'd like to check out more shows, go to foureyedradio.com.
Bond. James Bond. Shaken, not stirred.
Utter one more syllable and I'll have you killed.
I thought Christmas only comes once a year.
For your eyes only, darling.
I never joke about my work, 007.
For England, James?
Come in, Univex. James Bond here.
Am I going to have a problem with you, Bond?
Allow me to introduce myself.
You're that secret agent! That English secret agent from England!
No, you're cleverer than you look.
Still better than looking cleverer than you are.
My God, what's Bond doing?
I think he's attempting re-entry, sir.
007 reporting for duty.
Hello, the name's Berkeley, Ziggy Berkeley from Cinema on the Rocks, and with me is Eric Dewey from Socially Awkward Studios, and you are listening to Her Majesty's Secret Podcast, only on the Four-Eyed Radio Network. Yes, for the second time ever, Eric and I are actually in the same room.
It's weird, I know. Crazy.
It is very crazy. Crazy like a fox.
Are foxes actually crazy, though? Because they seem to just be, of
Megan Fox
average
seems like
intelligence.
she's batshit, so,
That's fair enough. That's a fair statement, I would say.
So here we are, the moment we wondered if we would ever get to. In fact, when we started this podcast, it was legally impossible to get to this point. Yes, that's right, folks. It's time to talk about Spectre.
Yes. We just came back last night. We went and actually saw the movie. For those of you listening, on the date of release for this episode, it's been out for 3 days. So,
unless, of course, you're one of our friends who lives in the UK.
Yeah, those
lucky
jerks.
people.
Yeah, that's what I meant. Lucky people.
Or in Europe or Mexico or somewhere that is not the United States. But you know what? That's perfectly fine. I'm okay with this because, it doesn't always have to be about them. It really doesn't.
But America.
Yeah, but our favorite spy is British because Jason Bourne is so second-rate.
I like the Bourne books. The original ones, the ones that Robert Ludlum actually wrote.
You see, I read the first one and kind of trudged through it, and I put down the second one. And I don't put down books. We've had this discussion a few times. Yeah. I didn't even put down Gravity's Rainbow, which is the worst pile of shit ever written.
I like Ludlum stuff. I've read several of his, but it's one of those, it is mindless spy drama stuff. It's not highbrow by any stretch of the imagination, but I enjoy it sometimes. But the stuff that came after when they were like Robert Ludlum's Jason Bourne in some guy you've never heard of, something.
Eric Van Lustbader wrote a lot of stuff, but he's very sensationalist.
Yeah, I didn't prefer his style, but we're here to talk about Mr. James Bond.
That's right. And as promised, we are going to go spoiler-free for roughly 20 minutes, maybe 15, depends, but we will warn you when we start to spoil things. So that way all of our fans can listen. If you have seen Spectre before, like our friends in Europe and the UK and Mexico and so on, or the people who went and saw the early shows like we did, then feel free to listen to the entire show. If you have not seen Spectre before, we will be spoiler-free for a little while. We'll tell you when we're going to be spoiling things, and then just press pause, go see the movie, and then listen to the rest of the show.
Yeah, and then come right back.
Yes. We won't know you were gone.
Yeah. We will have no idea unless you tell us, in which case, well, why would you do that?
On the other hand, we may have cameras everywhere. Everywhere.
Oh, I know it's like some sort of government conspiracy.
Nice shirt.
Somewhere he's sitting there going, but I'm not wearing a shirt.
I know.
So, Spectre, the film that was almost destined to not be. We've talked about in the past the legal battles to get the Spectre organization and certain characters back into the Eon world. Obviously, that finally got taken care of, and they were able to make us this film. That's not giving anything away because everybody knows. That's all stuff that's happened before.
It's only been a legal battle since 1960-something.
Yeah, that's nothing. That's walk in the park. But, they finally got the rights to it back, and we are getting, we have gotten this film. So it's an exciting day.
Very exciting day. I have to say that I wasn't quite sure what to think when I found out that this is what they were going to be doing right away. I mean, I was excited for it. On the other hand, because Spectre needs to be a long-running thing, I think. I don't think you can do it in one movie. So it's like, okay, we're starting something new, and we already had a set of 3 continuous Bond stories. So is this going to be going the way of a lot of television right now, where you can't walk into a movie without having seen all the ones that came before? And I mean, this is actually, I know this is why a lot more people are saying television now is better than it's ever been. This is why I don't watch a lot of television.
It's definitely much more angled towards the serialization these days. The storylines are definitely intertwined. There are a lot of shows that you can still... They have the long-running story arc, but it's almost a subplot, whereas the actual individual shows, you can still watch. Most of the police procedurals, I feel, are that way. Yes, they do have... If you watch all of them, you get that secondary story in the background, but each independent episode does tell its own story, has its own has its own beginning, middle, and end of just that episode story. But there are a lot that intend to be a long story arc, and not even just throughout one season, but throughout the entirety of the show. So,
and on that note, for those of you who have not yet seen Spectre, I strongly recommend that you have a fresh remembrance of the previous Daniel Craig James Bond movies. It's not 100% necessary. You can walk into this movie without having seen them. However, there are some things, like, say, the primary motivation of our hero that you...
little things
that will be passing you right by. At the very least, I strongly suggest that you have seen Skyfall first. Yeah. And realistically, the best way to see Skyfall is to have seen Casino Royale and Quantum of Solace first. And we do have enough references, so you do want to see what has come before in the Daniel Craig era. So you got 6 hours and change of research going.
Yeah. Yeah, I would definitely agree. This one is not one that... Well, I think you could step into it fresh and still enjoy the film. I think you will enjoy it much more if you're a Bond fan to begin with, and if you've specifically seen at least the Daniel Craig Bonds. I think you can definitely fully enjoy it without having seen any of the previous Bonds, as before Daniel Craig. Although you'll still get more out of it if you have.
You will get a lot more out of it if you have, and we will get to that in the spoiler section. But, at the very least, you will want to have a familiarity with what came before during the Daniel Craig era. You'll have a lot more fun.
Yeah, it's
and you will understand why he does what he does.
Exactly. The motivation is just a little part of the story, right? This movie... the movie is definitely... somewhat reliant on some of the stuff that comes before, but not entirely so. It's not like Quantum of Solace, where if you don't watch Casino Royale, you really won't understand a lot of what's happening in Quantum of Solace. However, it's definitely, like we said, it's just probably better if you've seen, the 23 or so movies that came before.
Yeah.
Just watch them all.
Realistically, watching them all is not a bad call. Hey, I'm a poet and didn't know it, or did I? Maybe I'm a beatnik. Not a hipster, just a beatnik. But, no, you definitely get the Craig era in your brain before you watch this one. Now, with that said, I will say in our spoiler-free zone, I'm giving this an overall definitely positive rating. Big shock, I'm sure. But
the shocker would be if we both came on and be like, "This movie sucks. Don't watch it." No,
it's definitely very good, very worth watching. I like the attention to detail, and a lot of attention was paid to a lot of details.
Yes.
So,
which we'll talk about a little bit more when we're not spoiler free. But there's definitely a lot of detail that you will need to be paying attention for. This is definitely a movie that, even though it's an action movie, and I know a lot of people, myself included, sometimes zone out during action movie. Like the action sequence, it's visually it's there, and I'm enjoying it, but I'm not really paying much attention to the story at that moment when they're fighting, or when the cars are chasing, or when there's some big battle or something like that, and it's just that action. It's just those flashing images on the screen, and a lot of times that's when I kind of tune out mentally. I would say you don't have to do that for Spectre. It does not lend itself to that, because you will you will miss stuff if you allow yourself to do that, but it doesn't allow you to do that.
Yeah, and the tiny details are important. The little things that flash on the screen that nobody necessarily talks about. They're either important or at least they're there for your enjoyment if you can see them. So lots of attention to detail. Pee before you go into the theater.
Yeah, there's not many opportunities that I would say would be a good pee break. So you definitely want to make sure your bladder is empty before going into the theater, because you're not going to want to miss. You're not going to want to miss even 5 minutes of this.
Yeah, and I think we can be relatively spoiler-free in mentioning that the locations are fantastic, because locations are very well publicized.
Oh, so. Yeah. There's been lots of stuff in the trailers and in the publicity before the movie about the different locations they were doing, and some of them are just absolutely gorgeous. Some of them very reminiscent of previous movies as well. So definitely great stuff. The cinematography in this, I felt, was just absolutely fantastic. There was some moments when I actively noticed certain shots and thought, oh, that's a very interesting way to portray this, and it's the best way to portray this, I feel.
Yeah, you got some outstanding advantage taken of the locations. Like, for example, when you're in the location in Austria, when you just look across the lake and you see the gigantic grandeur of the mountain in the background, you don't even have to be at the Super IMAX screen to get the sense of human scale there, where you are this little person in this magnificent, majestic Wagnerian setting, and it's just... That is one of the most amazing establishing shots I've seen in quite a while. For this little location, it's just beautiful the way that they did that. And then, of course, the fantastic advantage taken during the opening sequence that has gotten a lot of publicity, of course, at the Mexican Dias de los Muertos festival, the Day of the Dead. Just wonderful, wonderful advantage. In fact, very much made me think of Thunderball, because... except this on a much larger 21st century scale, of course, because in Thunderball, we have the Junkanoo, and you're taking advantage of that festival, that parade, and little chase sequence through the parade, which, of course, we talked about during our chase episode. Yep. And here, on the much, much larger, now we have a 9-figure budget scale, you have that for the Day of the Dead festival, and no pissing dog. Sorry, spoiler alert there, I guess, but no pissing dog, no pissy galore. But just that, everything about that opening sequence, everything, including the stuff that we'd have to spoil to talk about, but the stuff we don't have to, like the cinematography.
The costuming as well. The whoever was in charge of the set decoration and the actual clothing that everybody was wearing, just so much attention to detail, just absolutely fantastic.
Yeah, it was just an outstanding sequence, start to finish, just gorgeous. And then even the places that we've become familiar with as Bond fans, or as regular people, depending on where you live, London. We still get another fresh take on London, and yet you get the feeling that it's much like Daniel Craig described for when London was featured in Skyfall. It doesn't look like tourist London. It looks like the London that you would experience if you were a Londoner.
Yeah.
So if you actually knew to pronounce D-E-R-B-Y, Derby. Arsenal, just saying.
That's some kind of sports ball game with a ball of some type, correct?
Yes.
Okay. All right. It's not hand egg. It's that other one. Yeah, just some absolutely fantastic scenery throughout the entire film. A lot of different locations and very good use of those locations. And like I was talking about the costuming, that opening scene, which no spoilers because it's in the trailer and it's been on all of the posters. The outfit that Craig's wearing in that opening scene, the tux and tails with the skeleton painted on it, and the mask and the top hat. It's just absolutely amazing. I'm like, that's next year's Halloween costume right there. That's
yeah. If it weren't for the fact that I already know it's going to be too damn expensive, that's like Comic-Con wear, man.
Yeah. Well, if you could see, that's why it comes in handy to find and maintain artistic friends, because I think I could get a cheap used tux somewhere. You can
even your size.
Yeah. Surprisingly enough, there's a lot of online retailers that make very cheap suits that you can order in custom sizes. and they are very cheap suits.
For those of you who don't know, Eric is 6'5".
6'6", actually.
Oh, sorry.
And my wife would tell you 6'7", because I'm actually 6'6" and a little bit, and she likes to bump it up. I prefer to bump it down to the 6'6".
She thinks size matters.
Oh, dang. Well, we're just talking about my height right now. Anyways, but I know that I could get the actual tux itself for fairly cheap. The hard part would be having somebody paint the skeleton on it and do that in a quality fashion. I know that fabric paints are fairly inexpensive and can be done, but the quality of work, but I do know people who could probably pull it off, and I'll have to have a chat with them.
And you would have to get a cheater tie, I think, because tying that tie to get the bones exactly right...
You'd have to tie the tie first and then paint it, I think, is what you'd have to do.
So I think you'd want a clip-on for that.
Yeah. Well, and I think, well... spoilers, but that's not really much of a spoiler, but I think it was a clip-on or a sheath of some sort.
Well, he certainly stripped fast.
But yeah, and then the mask, I think, is going to be the hardest part to find.
I think that's going to be the part that costs you money.
Quality. Yeah.
Even with your artistic friends, because I remember meeting your artistic friends and seeing how much their work costs,
Yes.
and knowing that it's worth every penny, by the way.
Yeah, especially the mask makers. Sarah Wilkinson, for example, she makes some fantastic masks. If I was going for high-end, I could wear it to Comic-Con and then put it on my wall afterwards kind of mask. Then that's where I would go.
Yeah, and that's one thing that I think a lot of people who do not go to conventions or hang around cosplayers don't appreciate is the amount of true artistry and effort that goes into this. So it's not just Hollywood costume design, it's even the cosplay costume design. There is so much effort and
just amazing amounts of work and time and energy. Yeah.
So if you look at a mask for cosplay and say, that's too much, if the number isn't in 5 figures, you may want to slap yourself, because the amount of work they put into that is amazing.
Yeah, especially the higher quality ones, and especially if they're unique. If they're unique at all, that means that each one of those was independently made. They may have used a mold to begin with, but then, like Sarah does, she has these amazing Death Eater masks from Harry Potter that she makes. And she has the base mold where it starts with, but then she makes each one unique after that with different levels of, she does some battle damage on some of them, or different paint jobs, different things that make each one unique. You could look at 20 of them in a row and not realize they're from the same mold. That's how good they are. So yeah, I have no doubt that she could make this mask and make it of high quality and look very nicely. And I have no doubt that I would not be able to afford it if I had to do it, unfortunately. So that's something that if I were to do it, I'd probably have to get a mass-produced. Hopefully they would actually make one specifically designed to be like the one on the film.
Oh, I'm sure some marketing department somewhere has done that, even though, contrary to what many people seem to have thought in advance, this was not a product placement festival.
Yes, very interestingly so. And we are coming up close on that 20-minute mark, so I guess we probably could go ahead and...
Well, one thing I think we can talk about that has been very well publicized because it was released a month in advance that everyone knows about, the theme song.
Yes, the writing's on the wall, Sam Smith. What was your original take on the song when it was first released?
I think it's we had a listener who commented on it who was very colorful in their description. Specifically, they said it sucked balls. And I was not very far behind them, to be completely honest. In fact, going with the balls theme, it was like, did somebody kick him or cut them off? Or,
he's got a string attached, and when he hits the chorus, he just yanks the string. I admit I felt similarly, not necessarily as strongly. I didn't feel it was the worst thing I'd ever heard, but it didn't give me goosebumps. It didn't make me think like, oh, okay, with Skyfall, you can listen to that song and just get pumped. And you can even start, after you've seen the movie, you hear the song and you can start to envision the movie immediately. And before the movie came out, listening to the song made you pumped to see a James Bond movie. You were like, yes, this is going to be awesome. Writings on the Wall does not do that. You don't have that. I will admit, however, that it was much better in context. With the actual title sequence, listening to the song at the same time, it fit. It still wasn't great, but I felt it fit. I felt that it was appropriate for the title sequence. You definitely could have dropped a couple octaves.
I will meet you part way. It was better during the title sequence, the shirtless Daniel Craig title sequence. The title sequence, which we did go back to almost a Maurice Binder style in that everybody's naked, and, we have little things covering people's naughty bits, but it actually looked like an updated Maurice Binder. I liked the title sequence. It was interesting that it was based on Naked Bond, but that's okay. I mean, there are a lot of people out in the audience, female and male, I'm sure, who really wanted to see this, who have been wanting to see this ever since Daniel Craig jumped out of the water in Casino Royale. Well, you get to see this. So I bet Rachel Weisz was sitting there in the front row with her popcorn like, oh yeah, that's my man. But no, the song over the title sequence is better than the song on the radio or on YouTube or however you manage to hear it. With that said, if I could keep the lyrics and get someone else to sing it completely differently, I would like it much better. I don't have any problem with the lyrics specifically. It's just it's really weird. I've never been a huge Sam Smith fan. He's got a couple of songs that I tolerate, I think is the best way to put it. So I wasn't excited, when I heard that he was going to be doing it, and then when I heard the actual song, I realized that my lack of excitement was warranted. I'll honestly say that standing on its own, I hate his performance. I mean, I actually actively dislike his performance, but the song itself could be worse. If someone else sang it, I think it could be really, really good. It's just, I don't like the song. It's better in context, but yeah.
All right. Well, do you think we're ready to jump in and go ahead and make this non-spoiler free?
Ladies and gentlemen, it is time to go spoiler intensive. So, for those of you who have not yet seen Spectre, it's time to put this on pause, go to a movie theater, hie thee hence, watch yourself an awesome movie, and then come back and listen in on our discussion. For those of you who have already seen Spectre, and I know there are many, many, many of you who have.
Considering it broke several box office records in the UK the week of its release, I would say yes.
Well, that, and we've already had several listeners tell us they have seen it. So
some of them multiple times.
You international jet setters, you. So it's now time for us to go spoiler intensive. Everybody, are you ready? You have been warned. I've been giving you plenty of warning now that we're going to do our normal thing. And we're going to spoil the hell out of it. And the first thing we have to tell you, of course, is that Oberhauser is Kylo Ren.
Dang it! The internet rumors were true. Yes. Actually, I believe that Kylo Ren is actually Blofeld's kid. That's where I'm going to go with my prediction.
Okay, I thought Denby was Kylo Ren.
That could work.
Yeah, or was Kylo Ren Mr. Hinks? Now watch, we go into that other movie and Kylo Ren is wearing a skull mask. It's James Bond.
Wait a minute. He's gone rogue. He's gone bad. Yes.
So, but let's try to do this relatively chronological.
All right.
So, in fact, one thing that you just said is one trepidation I had about this movie going in. And I kind of still do. I mean, it fits the story perfectly fine. I understand. It's not a detriment to it. It's just, we're going to a well that we never had to go, that we only had to go to in the original implementation of James Bond twice. And once was in Die Another Day, so that doesn't count. And that is, in every single Daniel Craig movie now, James Bond has gone rogue. All of them. Do we have to do this every time?
He's a lone wolf. He's a wolf pack of one.
Like I said, it works in this story. Don't get me wrong. It works. It's just... And with the way that we end up this movie, it's going to happen again. It has no choice but to happen again in order for this story to continue. Because, okay, we're on spoilers now. This has set up in such a way that the next movie cannot help but be a direct sequel to this one.
Yeah, if they do anything else, it's going to just not work, because this definitely left that door wide open. It left that door open saying, look, we're going to continue this storyline. It tells a complete story. It's not like you were talking about with the television, where you watch one episode and you don't get the entire story. You do get a complete story in this film, but they definitely leave the door wide open for a direct sequel, not just another installment of a James Bond movie.
Yeah, and this is 2 major arcs on which it has to continue. Now, the whispers ahead of time were that this is part 1 of 2. Mm-hmm. That was something that I think even came from Sam Mendes, is that this was supposed to be part 1 of 2. And, of course, now this definitely, I think, puts to rest the idea of, is Daniel Craig coming back for another one? Because, 1, we know he's contractually obligated, and 2, he even said after he basically told the one reporter to fuck off, which is how we ended up getting the, Daniel Craig is leaving. No, he was just really tired of this reporter hounding him.
I read that interview. I didn't hear it, but I read it, and I was like, yeah, I would have snapped at him too. And that's, they get the headline where Daniel Craig would rather slat his... Wow, I'm finding words hard to make out of my mouth today.
And he's on his 3rd cup of coffee, folks.
I know, right? Normally I'd be on my at least 2nd glass of wine by now, so this is a weird recording situation for me.
And you've got a large selection of liquor directly behind you.
All right, let me just do a couple of shots real quick, get back on track. But no, so for those of you who don't know, Daniel Craig, at one point in an interview, did say that he would rather break the table in front of him and slash his wrists with the glass from the table than to be Bond again right now. And that's the important part. They kept pushing him. They asked him the same question about 5 times in a row. Are you gonna be Bond again? Are you gonna do it again? And he's like, dude, movie hasn't even come out yet. Why don't we just focus on the movie that's coming out, and then we'll worry about next movie later. And they kept pushing him, asking him over and over again. And so I think he just went like, okay, let me tell you something that will make you stop asking this question. And of course that became the big story instead of, hey, look, here's a movie. Why don't we talk about the movie?
Yeah, and similar thing actually kind of happened to Sean Connery, except he really didn't come back right away. When he's like, look, I'm not really James Bond. Stop asking me questions like I'm really James Bond. Yes, I'm bald, okay?
I think Tom Wilson has taken that to another level with his The Question song. Have you heard this?
No.
Tom Wilson, the guy who played Biff in the Back to the Future movies, he got so tired of people asking him the same questions over and over again as if he were actually Biff Tannen that he wrote a song about it, because he also happens to be a comedic musician as well as an actor. And it's absolutely hilarious. It's on YouTube, several versions of it because he's performed it many times. It's Tom Wilson, The Questions. It's absolutely hilarious, especially if you've watched the Back to the Future movies. If you haven't watched the Back to the Future movies, why?
Yeah, why?
Why not?
However, back to Spectre. So we have our opening sequence, as mentioned, and again, fantastically filmed, wonderfully filmed, and I just love the opening where you have him in the costume going up to the hotel with the girl, and she gets on the bed, and then, what are you doing?
Yeah, that's where he makes the quick change, which I'm assuming that he had all that on underneath the tuxedo painted like a skeleton, and that's why I think maybe that tie with the bones painted on it was just a like a cover or a sheath over top of his, because he had another tie on already.
Tearaway pants.
Yeah, exactly. It was a tearaway tie. And tearaway pants, but the top hat really sold the outfit for me. That's the part that you would have to get spot on. It would have to be that nice top hat. But yeah, so you get this great action sequence to open the movie, which fantastic. But before that, even,
and when he jumps out, I actually went when he jumps out the window onto the balcony. I'm like, okay, but then just this really long walk where he's not even paying attention. It looks like, and he's going down. It's like, 6 stories up, Jesus!
He's just hopping between buildings, and he's just
casually walking,
fixing. At one point he's fixing the cuffs on his suit as he does.
That's
become a really iconic.
It's a Craig thing.
Yeah, Daniel Craig's Bond thing.
It's just like Pierce Brosnan with his signature sex move of biting everybody. It's a wonderful tracking shot, just a fantastic tracking shot.
Yeah. So you get to see Bond jump across a few buildings, basically just a nice casual walk for him, just getting to a position where he can spy on the person that he was coming to spy on in the first place.
And then he just flat out kills a guy, and
not until after he hears about their plan to blow up a stadium full of people, of course.
But
he doesn't just, I don't like the looks of this guy.
But we also find out later, of course, exactly why he does this.
Yes.
But now this is the start of what Spectre rounded out to be for me. And that is Spectre, a.k.a. every Bond movie from the 1960s, plus Die Another Day.
I got that feeling even before the actual opening scene, because we got an honest-to-goodness gun barrel sequence
at
the very beginning. And that set me up. I was like, okay, they're they're going back to the well, yes, but that's okay.
Well, that's
well
how they were
dry.
That's how they were supposed to do it, though. That's how we've been waiting for them to do it again.
So as soon as I saw that, I was like, yes, okay, this is headed the right direction because we've wanted this, we've wanted to see this, and we're getting it.
And then the plot. I mean, yes, it's an original plot, but there's all these elements, both in the plot and in the details, that harken back to every movie from the 1960s, plus several Ian Fleming stories. Mm-hmm. That's why I say "And Die Another Day," because it is reaching and it is grabbing from everywhere. Except, unlike Die Another Day, it's not obnoxious.
There were a couple of moments that. Only a couple. There was a lot of reaching and grabbing little bits from here and there to kind of harken back, and most of it was not obnoxious. There were a couple of moments that I felt were a little over the top, but not specifically. And we talked about this briefly because for the first time ever since we were actually in the same place, we did sort of discuss the film a little bit before recording this.
Yes, we actually saw the film together. So
so unlike most of our recorded episodes where we have not discussed anything at all prior, this is one of those few times when we actually discussed it a little bit just because, we just got out of the movie. We weren't going to just not talk about it at all.
I shun you for the next 12 hours.
Yeah. Be silent! Obviously, we're in spoiler territory here. If you haven't been warned, it's too damn late now. Oberhauser is Blofeld. We all knew it. It was one of those secrets that everybody knew anyway, and everybody was saying it, even though Christopher Waltz and everybody else was, no, that's not my character. That's not who I am. Yeah, it is. And we all pretty much knew it.
Benedict Cumberbatch wasn't Khan either.
Exactly. He
was Kylo Ren.
That was a far less well-kept secret, actually. I think even the Oberhauser Blofeld connection was better kept than that one.
Well, yeah, because at least they threw you a red herring as far as, Denby could be.
Yeah. So no, we do get to see Blofeld, and we know, but it's still, even though we all know, it was still an exciting moment when they revealed it.
And I think it was made even more exciting because of the cat.
I think the cat was a little overkill.
I like the cat.
I would have been okay with the cat if we saw him after the reveal. The fact that we saw the cat before the official reveal, that's what killed it for me, because... And not killed it, I'm not like, get rid of the cat completely. It was a little heavy-handed for my taste, but still pretty cool. I'm not saying get rid of the cat
pro-pussy,
so... I'm not saying get rid of the cat altogether. I'm just saying maybe wait to show the cat until he's already said, my name is Stavro Blofeld. And then have the cat meander in, ringing his little bell. But the fact that we see the cat beforehand, it's kind of bearing the lead, I think. But
I like the cat. Just saying.
This movie could have been better with some additional chickens, I think.
That's true, because even though, and I thought, we're in Mexico, so we're in a location that's going to have plenty of chickens, but no, pollo free, so kind of disappointed that there were no chickens.
And I love the chickens.
And especially since we had the equivalent of the Piz Gloria allergy clinic. Yes, we actually had Piz Gloria in here. Not that Piz Gloria, but something that was supposed to be the exact analog of it.
Yeah.
On top of an Austrian Alp.
Yep. And it was, in fact, a health clinic of sorts. It was a mental health clinic, but still, not an allergy clinic specifically. And it wasn't an essential part of the... that wasn't an essential part of the storyline. It was just kind of a, hey, you know what? We've got this location. Let's do this. And it was another one of those good throwbacks to where, again, if you hadn't seen the previous movies, you wouldn't know that it was pointing towards anything. Having seen the previous movies, you get to see it and go, oh, that's... And it wasn't, like with Die Another Day, when it was just heavy-handed all over the place. This was a few key and, I think, very well-done throwbacks. And even to some things that weren't in the movies, necessarily.
Right, and in fact, something that was a very special treat for, in fact, we just discussed this in our last episode, the 100 or so of us that have actually read the Hildebrand rarity, Safe House's Hildebrand Rarities.
Yep. And they
don't announce it. It's just, if you're looking, you see it.
Q does say, who's this Hildebrand anyway? Or I don't even know who this Hildebrand is.
And yet, where was Q staying? At the Pevsner Hotel, which for those of you who have been looking at James Bond posters or credits for a long time will know has its origins in the name of Tom Pevsner.
So yeah, there was a lot of little throwbacks here and there, and just enough to where you would catch your eye and be like, oh, right on.
Yeah, the opening sequence, again, it's reminiscent of the Junkanoo and Thunderball. I don't want to say Carnival and Moonraker because honestly, I think they did not take major advantage of that like they could have. It's been one of my few disappointments in pew pew pew. But and another thing I very, very much liked, and they don't draw attention to it. Well, they kind of do, except they don't say it in that way, and it's not colored quite the same, but Goldfinger's car.
Yes.
Goldfinger's car is in this movie, as is, along with a fantastic prototype Aston Martin DB10.
Oh, that car is beautiful. That car is absolutely gorgeous. I specifically like the way where they've really modeled some of the lines on it. After the DB5, like you saw some of the DB models that came between 5 and 10 have all been like it seems that they've gotten longer and longer and longer. And if you look at like
they've gotten more Lamborghini-ish.
Yeah, and if you get to like outside of the DB line, even like the Vanquish, it's this huge long thing.
Vanish.
No, not the Vanish.
It's the
Never the
thing.
Vanish. This one is much more compact. It's back to that kind of short body style, and while it's much more sleek and newer looking than the DB5, you can definitely tell that the designers looked back at the DB5 when they were making this film.
Which they could easily do because there was one right there. Yes, he gets it back. And you're thinking, how can he get it back after it's shut up? Because Q makes a fantastic joke.
Yes, the DB5, we do get to see it. Not in action, but we do get to see it, which is awesome.
Well, kind of.
I want to know when Q had the time to finish rebuilding that car with everything else he was doing for Bond in this film.
Q has assistants.
He must have a ton because it went from nothing but a frame to being done.
Well, come on.
All while Q was busy doing other stuff.
Don't you watch these custom car shows on TV? I mean, they can do this shit in a week. Come on.
They do it in 60 minutes with 20 of it being commercials, actually.
But
speaking of commercials, we were very fearful. A lot of people were saying that this was going to be a 2.5-hour commercial.
Nope.
I saw very, very little product placement, and the product placement even that I did notice was not over the top in your face.
I saw what I would consider 3 overt pieces of product placement, one of which may not have actually been overt product placement. Because we had Aston Martin for the DB10, which they flat out make sure to mention.
Yeah.
Which is totally in line. I mean, because the DB5...
They've always done that. That's not new for this Bond film by any stretch of the imagination. There's always been a car partnership.
And an Omega watch, which is pointed out as an Omega watch...
Actually, they don't say it, but they do make sure that you can see the logo.
Yes, it's very, very obvious.
But unlike in previous films, he specifically mentioned the brand name of the watch, and he didn't go that far this time. It was just, here, we're going to show this nice watch on his wrist, and Q gives it to him, telling him that all it does is tell the time.
And that it has a very loud alarm.
Yes. But they make sure to, they get the close-up on the watch so that you can see the Omega logo, yes. But other than that, that was all I really saw.
He also mentioned a Sig Sauer by name.
Oh, that's
However,
right.
I don't necessarily think that that's product placement. In some way, but considering how we voted the PPK in our product placement episode, I suppose you could consider it that, but I'm not sure if promotional consideration was given or not. But really, in terms of mentioning the product, that's what you get. I mean, I didn't see him obviously going to drink a Heineken. I didn't see him shaving with a Gillette razor. And the fun part, for me, the most hilarious part, as mentioned earlier in just an early pre-Spectre discussion, Sam Mendes and Daniel Craig were both offered a lot of money by Sony to not only have a Sony phone in this James Bond movie, produced partially by Sony, but...
okay, so I guess now, thinking back, when he gives Moneypenny the phone...
That's just it. That's not a Sony phone. They didn't actually use a Sony phone in the movie. That commercial where you have Moneypenny advertising because Daniel Craig and Sam Mendes both said, no, Sony is not good enough for Bond. I am not going... You can offer me a ton of money. One speculation was in the 8 figures, which I think might be a little bit much, but who knows at this point. But they both said, no, that's not a Sony phone in the movie. They just got the promotional consideration for Naomi Harris to talk about it but that's not the phone that's in the commercial. So it says made for Bond, but it wasn't. It's a lie.
Yeah, I was, in previous movies, we've definitely seen some product placement, and there definitely was some in this film, but it wasn't over the top in your face. It wasn't, glaring, take you out of the moment, like some TV shows have been doing lately when they've been getting these car partnerships where all of a sudden the two main characters get into the car to go on a chase or to go to their next mission or whatever, and they stop to talk about the features that the car has. There was nothing like that.
And then, of course, you have movies like The Transporter Refueled, which is a 96-minute Audi commercial.
I honestly haven't seen anything other than the first Transporter. I haven't watched any of the sequels or the television series.
Realistically, the most recent one is a 96-minute Audi commercial. It's an in one eyeball, out the other type thing. As a standalone, straight-up action movie, it's actually kind of enjoyable. Don't even bother to relate it to the other movies, even though it's either a reboot, a remake, possibly continuation, maybe a prequel. We don't know, and I don't think they do either.
Well, here's what we're going to do. We're going to get this guy. We're going to call him the Transporter. We're going to put him in a suit and a fancy car, and he's just going to drive around.
And it's supposed to take place 5 years ago, and it's pretty much the plot of the first movie over again. And the guy they picked to have, he has the underwear model physique and Jason Statham's accent, but it's just, don't even bother relating it to the other movies. Just enjoy it by itself. That said, the best part about it is Ray Stevenson playing his father steals the show. I mean, Ray Stevenson is fantastic, and you can, especially if you think of him as an aged, retired James Bond, because that's the kind of character he's supposed to be. So, just a little Bondinessosity off to the side. If you look at it that way, it's kind of enjoyable. Enjoy it for Ray Stevenson more than anything else.
All right.
But as far as Spectre goes, back to the DB-10, I love the fact that Bond had no idea how it worked because Q couldn't
stole it because they weren't going to give it to him.
And so yeah, exactly. You had Q saying that's an Aston Martin DB10. It's really too bad it was supposed to be yours, but so he has no idea what any of this stuff does, and half of it doesn't work.
Yeah, it was unfinished.
I especially like the atmosphere switch.
Yes.
Music for 009. It plays New York, New York. Oh, God, no.
That was fantastic. The backfire switch. I like how the switches are just like completely unfinished, just there with those label maker, those old-fashioned,
Dymo labeler stuff.
Yeah.
So I guess there will not be 007 in New York because he doesn't like New York, New York.
Uh-oh. But maybe he just doesn't like the song. I don't know. But yeah, the car is beautiful. It's a shame that he parks it at the bottom of a river.
However, I do like that it has the most outstanding feature of the DB5. Air.
Yes, the air. That was. I love how he just flips the switch and doesn't like. Okay, here's hoping this does something. And oh, okay.
Yep, ejector seat. All right.
Actually, this one's an ejector seat for himself with a parachute that straps onto him from the back of the seat as well. So.
And it's a self-fastening parachute, so it's like self-tying shoes, only for James Bond.
Yes.
And
Back to the Future here.
And prior to that, of course, we have a fantastic car chase, which I love how Dave Bautista described it in the preview video, saying you have our film's hero, Mr. Hinks, chasing his nemesis, James Bond, through the streets of Rome.
Hinks was a great henchman. I like the fact that they gave him one line. Word, really.
Yeah, and I also
really plays up to his strengths as an actor.
Well, the thing is,
I like Bautista. He was great as Drax.
And to be fair, one thing that I like about Bautista as well is that once he got the part as Drax in Guardians of the Galaxy, he says, okay, yes, I'm comfortable in performing in front of an audience and a microphone and that because I've been a professional wrestler, but I can't act. So he went to acting school, and you can actually tell. And I think his performance here was actually even better because he's getting into a very specific type of character, and I can see what they meant. They wanted an iconic henchman on the order of Jaws and Oddjob, so what do? They gave him knives for thumbnails. Which I thought, because I'm thinking, how are they going to do this?
He's got the physique of Oddjob just extended. He's a
taller man than Harold Cicada.
And then you've got the knife thumbnails, which he uses to great effect.
Yes, explain your qualifications. And then he just goes and he grabs a guy's head, takes out his eyes with his thumbnails, and then snaps his neck in a wrestling move. So, boom. And I really enjoy Mr. Hanks. But that was also, you get a twofer with Mr. Hanks in terms of the throwbacks, because when you see the knives for thumbnails, you think of Jaws and his teeth. And Teehee
and his claw hand.
And then in the soon-to-be iconic fight on the train, which takes...
That was intense.
James Bond train fights to a whole new level.
Oh, they destroyed that train car.
Train car, that was at least 3 of them.
Yeah.
And it was the loneliest train on Earth. Did you notice that? Because you have Bond and Madeline and Mr. Hanks, and they manage to not run into anyone else, even though they go through the dining car, through the kitchen, and into a cargo compartment.
Yeah. Yeah, that was just a fantastic fight scene. I mean, several times the action had you literally wincing, like, ooh, what's it? You know, that to me is the mark of a very good fight scene, when you get into it like that and you almost feel the pain of the participants as they're being thrown around and through things.
And did you catch the other 1960s reference in there? How did Mr. Hanks end up getting out of the train? From Russia. Think of the barrels being thrown out of the back of the boat.
Oh, gotcha.
It's not exactly how they did it in the movie, of course, but it's a definite throwback visual.
Yeah.
And another thing that makes me look at this as every 1960s Bond movie, aside from all of these throwbacks that are very specific to that era, look at the color palette. The color palette is a 1960s color palette, just on higher definition stock.
Yeah.
But it is a definite 60s color palette, because if you compare it to most regular films right now, it's not the same optimized for high def anything. This is a 1960s wash color palette, which I thought was interesting. And if you look at the fashion choices, they're modern, but of the 60s retro style, especially on Swan. Did I mention I like Satin and Gravity?
Yeah. Yeah, she is absolutely stunning in this film. But yeah, you do get to see a lot. Even, I mean, granted, it's kind of making a comeback, those kind of 60s skinny suits. They're kind of the thing these days, but they definitely made the choice to go with that in many cases. A lot of the characters had that type of style. And then, of course, you get the white dinner jacket for Bond himself, which is fantastic.
There are dinner jackets, and there are dinner jackets. This is the letter.
We get a somewhat... It was a surprise for me. I don't know if it was given away in any of the trailers that I specifically avoided so that I wouldn't see it, but we do get the surprise cameo of Dame Judi Dench.
Yes, and that is, of course, that is the reason why you have to see Skyfall before you see this movie, because otherwise, who's she?
Yeah. What?
And why does this matter?
Why does Bond care so much?
And this is a great, and this was important to me though, because you knew from the trailer he was going rogue. Why would he do this? Oh, because that M told him to.
Yeah.
Okay, yes,
yeah.
This makes complete sense then, because let's face it, as Silva pointed out so well, M is mommy. Yeah. Whether she is in real life or not does not matter in terms of how he treats her, how he respects her. She holds the same esteem that most of us who do not have poisoned relationships with our families hold to their mothers.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it's totally understandable. And yes, it had to be fresh footage because of what she said. And I thought that was awesome.
Yeah. Yeah, we get a lot of other, just images, and especially in the opening title sequence, we do see some flashback images.
And hey, great for those actors, because unless they signed something originally when they made their initial films, they get paid a little extra royalty for having to have their image used again.
Yeah.
Because you do get to see Vesper again, you do get to see Silva again, and I thought it was one of the most powerful, pointed moments for me was when we're in L'Américaine, which I also really like because, no, it's not the same type of place, and they say they're in Tangier, but we know they're filming in Morocco, and L'Américaine, that's a Casablanca reference. It's Rick's Café L'Américaine, and just one of the great classic noir espionage locations. I mean, for those of you who... I don't remember if I've ever mentioned it on the air or not. I think I might have once. I consider Casablanca, if I'm going to have to say there's a best movie, the best movie of the black and white era. It is I consider it a perfect movie. And if you haven't, and I'm looking for the excuse to make Eric watch it, and I think I've come up with it. So we will probably be discussing this in an episode on the show at some point.
All right.
But I like that L'Américaine turns out to be this location, but when they find the secret room, and I love how you find the secret room. I think that was cool. It's a classic trope that's not normally an espionage trope. It's a Tom and Jerry trope, for crying out loud. But I love it. And they find the secret room, and the powerful moment is he sees a VHS tape. marked Vesper Lind interrogation.
Yeah.
And you can see, and this is all Daniel Craig body language, it tears the hell out of him, but he doesn't watch it. And you have to think the temptation was there.
Oh, absolutely.
And you can just see him being ripped up inside. And he puts it down, and he walks away, and he gets to the business at hand.
Definitely a very powerful moment, and one of those that you're just like, whoa, wonder what's on there. And I know he wants to know what's on there, but doesn't at the same time. So,
and we never find out.
Not in this movie, anyway.
No. And then, of course, going back to how he even gets there to begin with, I found the way Mr. White was used very interesting. Because one of the things I did not expect was that he just plain defected from SPECTRE and that was it. I had been under the impression that perhaps he had been captured again and was in some kind of witness protection, but nope. And interesting how they had him on the slow death from thallium poisoning. And God, did you see that what they did to his eyes? That was just creepy. I mean, because the makeup job on this is fantastic, because if you remember, even when he was beaten up, Mr. White, when we saw him in Casino Royale and Quantum of Solace, is basically the elderly-looking James Bond, suave, debonair, very clean, always looking sharp, always looking good. You beat him up and he still looks good. And oh my God, he looked like a methed-out hobo. And I'm not saying that in a bad way. He looks like somebody who is dying of this nasty, nasty stuff. So, and just wonderful performance by Jesper Christensen.
It was very well done, and I thought the way they used him was very good, and definitely a fantastic actor. That scene played out exactly how it needed to play out, and it was very well done.
And then moving back a little further, we have Monica Bellucci as the oldest Bond girl ever at age 50, which I thought is fantastic.
I really liked Craig's comment on that when people asked him, what do you think about Bond succumbing to the charms of an older woman? And he said, you mean a woman his own age?
Yeah. And Craig is not quite 50 yet, but still. And Monica Bellucci's gorgeous. And,
yes, she is.
But the other thing that I love about how they portrayed her, and Hollywood, take note that you can do this. Did you notice something very important? She wore almost no makeup. You could see the lines of her eyes.
Yeah.
I mean, they allowed her to look her age. I mean, do most women really, really wish they could look this good at age 50? Yes. But the point is, they don't doll her up.
Yeah.
They don't they don't even put on the most basic of party eye makeup. It's just like, no, what you see is what you get. And they still make her sexy. They still make it, I mean, we got a sex scene there, folks. Yep. I mean, not quite as much as some of us who have seen her in other movies, which you had seen. And for those of you who have not seen her before, most of you would recognize her from the Matrix sequels. She is, in fact, one of the only reasons to watch the Matrix sequels. Other plays, in fact, I highly recommend this, because I'm always trying to encourage people to expand their culture. And the thing is, I know so much of our audience is outside of North America, so I don't have to worry about this, but there is a French film, Le Pacte de Loup, which was released as Brotherhood of the Wolf, and you can see it in either French or English, either way. A fantastic movie based on true events that have become legend. 18th century France, there was a possible werewolf attack. And so, very, very interesting. She's in this movie. Great movie. If you want to see more with her, if I'm going to pick one Monica Bellucci movie for you to watch, it is Brotherhood of the Wolf. But again, her role is much smaller than I think a lot of people anticipated.
That is something I was going to mention. It was built up that she was going to be, a main Bond girl in this film, and it was more of a passing thing. It's kind of there.
She's the secondary Bond girl.
Yeah.
She is Plenty O'Toole, except not in the airheaded sense at all. Do you need a moment?
I just may. I'll just cleanse my palate by looking across the room at Eva Green and the Casino Royale poster on your wall.
Okay, sounds good. Yes, we are at my particular studio now, and yes, I do have the Casino Royale poster on the wall, and directly behind Eric is an extensive liquor cabinet.
But of course.
So, but I really, really enjoyed her performance, and again, in modern Hollywood, you can't emphasize this enough, how great it was that they allowed her to look like herself. And it's also a compliment that J.J. Abrams and company are being given for Force Awakens. Carrie Fisher is allowed to look her age.
Yeah.
And I really hope that maybe we're crossing a threshold now where we can maybe have women allowed to be themselves. That's just awesome to me.
It would be nice if that trend continues, because I think there's stories that can be told with characters of different ages. You don't have to have every character in the film supposedly looking like they're 30.
Yeah, and you can say, well, Judi Dench was older. Yes, but look at the role she had to play. She was playing a motherly role.
Yeah.
Whereas you can have the aging and bald Sean Connery still acting like a sexy man.
Well, to be fair, though, he was always bald.
Well, yeah.
He started out that way, even when he was very young looking.
Well,
unfortunately, the hair had already gone.
He wore a toupee in Dr. No. We know this. But just that he's allowed to be portrayed that way as a sexy old bald man.
Yeah.
But you can't have that with older women, and we're now finally, hopefully, seeing that being allowed to happen with people other than Charlotte Rampling. And not that there's anything wrong with Charlotte Rampling, by the way. I'm just talking about one of the few older women who still is allowed to be portrayed as sexy in movies. And for those of you who don't watch very many French movies, you may not know this. Of course, Eric has seen her before.
Have I?
Zardoz. Yes,
I tried to purge that movie from my mind.
I had to make a Zardoz reference. I just had to. So, anyway. No, but Monica Bellucci, very good on her. I hope to see more of this out of Hollywood. Yep. Now, with that said, we go to the other end of the spectrum. I had to reach for that one, folks. I know I did.
That's okay.
And this is someone I honestly wasn't sure about from the start, Léa Seydoux. It's not that I have ever disliked her. I haven't. I enjoyed her in her performances in the other movies I've seen her in. It's just a matter of I wasn't quite sure how she was going to fit into here, and because I had a suspicion. I don't know if you did, because let's face it, everybody was concentrating on Oberhauser's going to be Blofeld. And I took speculations a lot further the more small details I learned. Like, when I saw his name was Oberhauser, I know where the name Oberhauser comes from, and that is from the story, Ian Fleming's story of Octopussy. We find out that Oberhauser is the name of the guy who raised James Bond after his parents were killed. So I'm like, okay, there's going to be some relation there. Yeah. And it turns out that they made him a different Oberhauser. They made him Oberhauser the Kid, which now, of course, brings in a trope that we haven't had before in James Bond, but it is one of the oldest tropes in comic books ever. And that is that the hero and his nemesis are brothers.
Dum, dum, dum.
Adoptive brothers in this case. However,
not quite evil twin, but, you know.
Blofeld is Bond's brother.
I dig it. I'm okay with that.
I'm okay with it. And I think part of the reason I'm okay with it is that it is such a trope.
Yeah.
And
well, it also ends up, it gives more reason for Blofeld to have it out for Bond specifically so much. Whereas in the previous incarnations of Blofeld, he's just a criminal who Bond just keeps getting in his way. This makes it a lot more personal and makes the actions seem to make a little bit more. I don't want to say it makes sense, because he's still nuttier than a squirrel turd.
It gives it more depth.
It gives it more depth. It gives it more relatability, as far as like thinking, okay, now I can see why maybe he went crazy if this is how he felt. You know, he mentions a cuckoo bird. You know, cuckoos lay their eggs in other birds' nests, and if the cuckoo hatches first, which it usually does because they have a shorter gestation period, they push the other eggs out of the nest and kill them. So he has that kind of mentality going. He feels that he was an egg pushed out of a nest by Bond's cuckoo.
That's not a euphemism.
Oh.
Or is it? No, definitely not. But so I knew I was speculating there's going to be some sort of connection. I just didn't realize he was Oberhauser younger. I thought he was going to be Oberhauser older, but that's okay. And I kind of wondered about that with aging, but it
would have been really hard to explain away Bond not recognizing him right away, and it wasn't.
But he did recognize him right away.
Yeah. So. That's right. They recognized each other right away.
But the other thing that I had speculated, once you found out from the trailers that Madeline Swan was Mr. White's daughter, I placed my bet and I won. Madeline Swan is Tracy. I called it in my head that she would be Tracy, and They play her a bit differently, but what do you have? We have the daughter of a major criminal, not set up in the same way as we were in On Her Majesty's Secret Service, but as we have discussed when we discussed that movie, you can't do that now unless we're making Bollywood, because arranged marriages don't happen in polite Western society. I'm not saying they don't happen at all, because of course in some cultures that's the thing, and if that is your culture, I'll respect that because that is your culture. But it's not Bond culture. It's not the culture that we're looking at here.
Right.
And so we have it set up a different way, but I kind of thought she's going to turn into Tracy. She's going to turn into Tracy. And she did. With that said, I love how the ice gets broken. They have the fight with Mr. Hanks. What are we going to do now? And in my head, I'm like, you're going to fuck like bunnies. And yes, they do. And I actually love the camera work on that. I love the blocking. And I know that sounds serious. Okay, you're breaking into a sex scene. It's like, yes, but you have to see how this is filmed and edited. It's kind of like in Bram Stoker's Dracula, so the Francis Ford Coppola version, where you have the scene where Lucy gets beheaded. Her head flies across the screen, and then next shot, cut to a side of beef. That is some of the most spectacular editing I've ever seen. And so here we have, what are we going to do now? Cut to a really intense, okay, we're about to go to bed. Yeah. But there's more to it. You get so much out of the body language that's more than we're just having post-traumatic sex. You can tell a switch is thrown there. And this is all direction, editing, body language, all of it put together. If you just have the direction, if you just have the editing, if you just have the acting, it doesn't work the same. This is the harmonization of all of those things together, making a more powerful statement. This is filmmaking, basically.
Yeah, it's a very good scene, and it's very important for their relationship. It's not just a sex scene to have a sex scene in the movie. It is very important for their relationship development to have that moment with each other. So, yeah, again, like you said, just very powerful direction, very good acting out of it to make it into something more than just, okay, yeah, they need to have sex now because they just went through something traumatic, so blah, blah, blah. But no, it's very important, I think, to the character development of these two and their relationship to have this scene. So it works on many levels.
Yeah. And now, of course, after that fantastic scene, which, of course, since this is a James Bond movie, rated PG-13, doesn't go as far as some of us might have liked. Not necessarily saying I want to see Daniel Craig hitting it, but I can't say I would have objected to some of the other visuals that would have gone along with that.
No, not at all. As we mentioned, Léa Seydoux is looking mighty fine in this movie, so it wouldn't have been bad to see more. But it is what it is, and they did show what was necessary.
Yes.
for the story. Anything more would have been gratuitous. I'm okay personally myself with gratuity, but
yeah, I mean, we've had this discussion vis-a-vis Samantha Frost. And perhaps Dr. Molly Warmflash. But anyway.
Wouldn't have minded a little Plenty O'Toole thrown into the mix there either. That
very briefly, if you have freeze frame. I don't know how I know this.
I'm going to take a stab in the dark and say you have freeze frame. That's how you know this.
With that in mind, then we get a wonderful scene where they're sitting at the train stop wondering what's going to happen next. And Goldfinger's car shows up, which is just fantastic. It's like, Goldfinger's car. And then,
which I guess technically was a little bit more product placement because they did specifically mention that it was a Rolls-Royce.
But I think that
Phantom.
I think that specifically they mentioned that so you could further catch the hint of this is specifically Goldfinger's car, which was a 1948 Rolls-Royce Phantom. So I'm okay with that. And then, I don't know, did you catch the next 1960s Bond movie reference that happened immediately after?
After we see the car?
Yes.
I probably am not thinking of the same thing that you're thinking of, so...
Your brain just has to make a very small leap. It's not a volcano fort. It's a crater fort.
Yes, okay.
But it is a crater fort.
I was focusing on the driver. I'm like, was there something about that driver that was specifically mentioned? Yes, the Blofeld's base of operations, especially some of the buildings he had, very, very reminiscent of what we've seen in some of the previous films. And, of course, you do have it built into this meteorite crater that happens to be out in the middle of nowhere.
Yeah, so... not a volcano, but it is a crater, and it does eventually blow completely up.
Yes.
Now, this is something that Eric was not in a position to catch. He will be soon.
Oh.
But in our grand reveal scene, where we have Blofeld saying, yes, my name is Ernst Stavro Blofeld, from my mother's side. And, of course, the actual boss of the operation, because we all know the real boss of Spectre has always been the cat.
That evil pussy.
I love the cat.
Like I said, I like the cat. I just wish we didn't see him until after her, probably. But I wish we didn't see it until after the reveal. But that's just personal preference, I think.
But Eric, you love Persians. You love Persians.
Oh, man. Can you imagine the hair cleanup if you had that cat? Oh, there'd be little white hairs everywhere. I have a dog that's that color, and yeah. I have a jacket that I brought with me in case it gets too cold out here. That's like a wool peacoat type of jacket. I spent a good 30 minutes and half a roll of a lint roller to somewhat de-hair it because it had gotten somewhere near where the dog had somewhere been near once. Can't imagine having a cat like that wandering around. Like we've had cats with long hair like that before, but it's always been dark hairs.
But during the reveal scene, we then have a Bond torture, which is taken word for word dialogue and situation, except made modernized, from the Kingsley Amis novel Colonel Sun.
Oh, okay.
I mean, it is word for word, which I found a very interesting reference, because that's not just the 100 of us who've read the Hildebrand Rarity. And when I say that, by the way, I know we have a considerably larger audience than 100 people. I see the numbers every week. It's just, I will be surprised if all of you listening to this have ever read the Hildebrand Rarity, and that's fine. I understand
or
that.
would want to.
It's not really a good story. You only read it because you really go after it. And even more so, people who go after Colonel Sun, because that's not an Ian Fleming book anymore. But yeah, it's taken directly, word for word from that. So another reference made just for us. Like they did in License to Kill. Just saying. But so we have Bond of the 1960s yet again, and then we have our escape, and what does Blofeld end up getting? Oh, just the same injury Donald Pleasance had.
I know. I did like that. He had the cloudy eye and the scar going, basically down the face through the eye. It was so perfect. And again, another throwback to the previous Blofeld, without being over the top about it, without being... Yeah, well, I would say this one is pretty up there.
It's up there, but he's not bald.
No.
And even though he's got kind of a North Korean fashion sense, it's not entirely there. You have the open flare jacket as opposed to the completely closed. It's the same type of collar. It's the same basic line, but it's not the total just North Korean...
He didn't go full Kim Jong-un.
Yeah, exactly.
One thing, though, you think he's got all this money, he's got all this power, he's got plenty of resources, obviously. Dude couldn't afford a pair of socks?
Or a better haircut. And this is something I've always thought about George Clooney as well. I mean, dude, I'm sorry, your haircut sucks. It's like when you have that much
when he was
money,
rocking the Caesar, that was one time when I thought it would be a good idea to buzz my hair. With these ears, not a good idea to buzz my hair.
Prince Charles Dewey? No, not quite that bad.
And to be fair, my face has grown into my ears since high school when I tried to do this. So, yeah. But, Clooney's always been a bit of an icon.
I may have had Mel Gibson hair once upon a time, which is, of course, before we knew certain things about him. Now I don't think it's possible. And it'll be interesting when I finally do this, because I do want to do this. Lethal Weapon 2 used to be one of my favorite action movies that wasn't a James Bond movie. And I don't think you can possibly watch that movie without irony now.
I love the Lethal Weapon series. I do. And I know he's batshit crazy, but at the same time, those are just good flicks. Those are just good, fun flicks.
That's what... And I think... I'm very glad that he ended up making Machete Kills, because that allowed me to see a Mel Gibson movie that I didn't have to see as a Mel Gibson movie, and allowed me to get kind of back into, okay, I'm okay watching him as an artist and separating that from his life. Yeah. So, however, returning back to the Kim Jong-un fashion show, another really, really great scene, and this is before the torture sequence, of course, is when they're in the video room, and he brings up the video of how Mr. White dies, and he kills himself. And here you have Bond and Swan in the room, and Bond is he knows what's going to happen, so he's trying to run and say, shut that shit off.
Yeah.
And they knock him to the ground, and he just looks at Madeline and says, you don't want to watch this. You don't want to watch this. Look at me. Look at me. And before the moment comes, she looks at him. And this is two things. This is just a powerful emotional moment to begin with. And this is showing the James Bond of Daniel Craig style that we came to understand in Casino Royale. Because this is James Bond who walked into the room and found Vesper Lynd crying in the shower and just comforted her and just understood what she was going through and was just going to be there for her. And this is the same Bond. You do not want to see your father kill himself. Don't look. Look at me instead. And you can see what you hoped what you were seeing in the sex scene where a switch got thrown, but this is where you're confirming the switch got thrown because she looks at him. So you can see the trust was there. This is your confirmation of what you saw before. And you can see, okay, I trust you now. I'm okay here. And it's just a very, very powerful moment.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. You get to see, because you really get to think of, especially if you've read the books, you really start to think of Bond as pretty much a sociopath. And, for his job, he kind of does have to have some sociopathic tendencies. He has to be able to separate himself from empathy to kill another person. And that's part of his job. But you get to see with Daniel Craig, especially in these two scenes, we were talking about the shower scene in Casino Royale and this particular scene in Spectre, you get to see that, okay, he's not a sociopath. He just plays one on TV. He does it when he has to. He turns it off. He turns those feelings off when he has to do his job, but they are there. He does have them. And that makes him so much more a deep and complex character than I think even Ian Fleming originally envisioned. So that's fantastic.
Yeah, because I don't think Ian Fleming made him all that deep and complex. We've had this discussion before where I think the movies really evolved him much, much better. And it's just how it is, but I think it's also how Bond has therefore been able to exist and thrive for more than 60 years. Because we've gotten past the framework that Ian Fleming came up with in the early 1950s, and we've let him evolve with time, so he is still relevant to us, and we don't see him as a misogynist dinosaur, a relic of the Cold War.
A blunt instrument, perhaps?
That might not be what she said.
Ew. That's his mom you're talking about.
He's complex, like this 12-year-old McKellen.
This is very delicious. Yes, I've traded in the coffee for a glass of 12-year-old single malt McClellan on the rocks. Delicious.
And for those of you who may remember, in Skyfall, it was revealed that James Bond had a preference for Macallan whiskey. I unfortunately looked at a bottle of Macallan 50 and was like, I'm sorry, I could either go on a vacation or I could buy this scotch. So, had to settle for 12. You're really not settling if you're getting Macallan 12, it's honestly.
Very tasty. It's very smooth. For those of you who don't drink scotch, first of all, why? It's probably, actually, the majority of people I've talked to who don't like scotch have had only a cheap scotch. It's the same problem I run into when I talk to people who don't like wines or don't like certain beers or something. It seems that they've only had the cheap stuff, and so they assume that everything is going to be that. Cheap scotch is just that. It's cheap, and it's gross, and it should only be used for mixing. I would say as long as you stay above the, say, $25 a bottle price point and above, you're going to be into some decent stuff that you can drink neat or on the rocks. I prefer on the rocks. I like it cold, first of all, and I think it does reveal some of the flavor when you don't want to dilute it. You don't want to let the ice melt too much. You want to drink it before the ice melts.
But you do want to let the ice melt a little bit because one thing that a lot of people don't realize when they use whiskey stones is you're missing out on something because some amount of melting ice, if you don't let it go to total water, actually releases some more of the character of the scotch. Yeah. So you get a little bit more by drinking it on the rocks rather than neat, provided you don't let the cubes melt all the way down to water.
Yeah. And if you use whiskey stones or something like that, more power to you. It's a good way to save on ice and whatnot.
Helps the environment.
Throw a couple of drops of water in. Just a couple of drops. That's all it needs. A couple of drops of water, swish it around. It releases those aromas especially and the flavors, and it's so good. You can also, if you don't want your ice to melt too much, if you're a slower scotch drinker, I know I can clear gas pretty quickly, as I've evidenced here, but if you are a bit slower scotch drinker, you can actually throw your bottle of scotch in the freezer beforehand. The alcohol content is high enough that it will not freeze solid. It doesn't even get syrupy. But then you can pour essentially ice-cold scotch over ice and still get the release of flavor and the aroma without having to drink it quickly.
Or you can drink it at the bar in an ice hotel.
Oh.
Like the one in Die Another Day.
Yes. Let's reference that movie some more.
But again, you have so many of the references. This is like, what if Die Another Day had worked right? What if it had worked properly?
You do have that. I was worried, I will admit, when we got to the title sequence and they started showing images of the previous Craig movies. I was like, oh no. They've done this before. They did this specifically in On Her Majesty's Secret Service with the opening title sequence where you got glimpses of everything except what you were about to see. The difference, of course, is you do get Craig in this title sequence.
And a giant octopus.
So you actually get Bond in this title sequence.
Naked with an octopus. Hentai fans.
Like tentacles, do you? So it was troubling only because I know how I feel about past instances where they've tried too hard, but it quickly gets past that. It very quickly gets past that to where I was like, okay, nope, they've done it right here. They did what Die Another Day should have been, is what we get here with those references. We get good, classy, like I said, just not over the top in your face. Just it's there if you catch them. I'm sure I miss them. I'm sure if we go back and watch this movie again, which of course I'm going to do several times, I'm sure I'm going to catch things that I didn't catch the first time, and that's awesome. The fact that I can even. I'm pretty sure. I mean, I don't know for sure, obviously, but I'm pretty sure I'm going to catch some things that I didn't catch the first time around.
Like a door left open, a woman walking by. Yes, I just referenced a song I don't like.
It's always the songs that are the worst that get stuck in your head the most, I think.
It's all about that bass.
It is.
Now, I will say, this is not a perfect movie. There is actually one glaring plot hole.
All right.
And that is, I mean, even though we get confirmation that, yes, everybody's correct later on in the movie, but there is nothing that should lead them to a definite conclusion that all of the events from Casino Royale up through Skyfall were connected to the same organization and the same person. When they come to that conclusion, there's nothing that should have told them that. I mean, yes, you looked at the ring, and okay, you did a DNA analysis in the blood. You did not get the DNA of all of those people off of that ring.
I was like, how many people have worn this particular ring? I don't understand. Like, is it something that they're like, here's what we're going to do. We've got this one ring. All right, everybody, put your ring on, okay? Take it off. Pass it to the person to your left. They put it, like, we're going to go around the circle. Everybody wears everybody's ring, okay?
I mean, you can circumstantially kind of guess, but there's never any any satisfying thing that says that they should be able to definitively connect this until, of course...
It would be one thing if, like, one other DNA trace was on them. Like, I could understand, like, okay, you know what, we got this ring, and it happened to have Le Chiffre's DNA on it. And maybe that was because maybe that was Le Chiffre's ring before he died, and now that ring has been passed on to this new person.
And somehow the DNA managed to stay on this metal ring forever.
He was checking in the little grooves of the logo, and maybe it's a deep logo,
understand.
maybe it's got some texture. Shh.
There's blood on it, but not that much. Shh.
You don't know how porous the surface where the logo is. You never know. I'm willing to go that far and give one other DNA sample. But the fact that he's like, hey, look, every villain we've had from every movie thus far that Daniel Craig has been in, somehow their DNA is on this ring. That was a bit of a stretch. Luckily, it was not the defining plot driving device. It wasn't we need this in order to do this. It was just kind of the only thing that gave Q his revelation, but Bond was already learning the same thing because Blofeld was telling him. He was telling him, every bad thing that's ever happened in your life was me.
And I have killed every woman you loved. And of course, that doesn't bode well for our new Tracy, does it?
They did make sure to cut over to her face when he said that, and she's like...
Well, not only that, but...
Oh, crap.
At the end...
Or as Hinks would say, shit.
Yes. But you notice another thing. Did you see Hinks die?
I did not, and I'm very glad for that, because I would love to see Hinks back.
Because I think what we have here is... we have to see the entire primary cast back in the next movie. except for possibly Monica Bellucci.
That was, that final scene when they're on the bridge and Bond has Blofeld in front of him on the ground, completely prostrate. He's all he has to do is pull the trigger. And I'm like, no. You do not kill Blofeld in the very first movie that you have his character back. You can't do this. And I was very scared there for just a moment. Like, I knew in the back of my head, it's like, no, they need this character. They're not going to kill him off in one movie. But at the same time, I'm like, they could very easily kill him off in this movie.
But you also had... I placed my bet that he wouldn't do it, and it was for two reasons which I think are going to pan out. If he does it, Tracy, I'm saying in air quotes, Madeline, is watching.
Yes.
If he does it, she walks.
Yeah.
Now, granted, that means she lives happily ever after raising chickens. If he does not, then he gets her, so Blofeld can kill her in the next movie. Or try. Because, let's face it, what's the next movie going to be? Blofeld escapes prison.
Yeah. That's,
just like, all the villains in James Bond Jr.
I will say, though, that this does bring up... You saw how much surveillance and how much technology that Blofeld had at his disposal.
Well, yeah, because
he was trying to get more. That was the whole plot of the movie, that he was trying to get
He was already
everything.
connected to all the intelligence services.
Yeah, and he was trying to get even more. He was trying to get even more power consolidated. So the fact that now this one of your least favorite plot points from Skyfall can be somewhat explained by this. Now that we know that Silva was part of SPECTRE and
law-abiding citizen bullshit,
would then have access to all this additional information that we didn't know.
But
he
you
would
still
have
can't
access to
predict it
before.
3 years in advance. You're still assigning him Nostradamic powers. Nostradamic is a word I just made up, and it is awesome. I encourage all of our audience to use the word Nostradamic in your daily lives.
Hashtag Nostradamic. We're going to have to figure out exactly how to spell that. We're making that a hashtag, folks. So do it. Whenever you make a prediction of any type, whether it be a sports ball game or anything, or who Kylo Ren is going to be, whatever your prediction may be, hashtag Nostradamic.
Mr. Hinks is Kylo Ren.
So far the vocabulary matches up, as far as we know.
And Oberhauser is Luke Skywalker's son.
Oh. Oberhauser is Anakin. Because in the books, that was his son's name. He had twin girls, and then...
Actually,
Anakin.
those were Han Solo and Princess Leia's children. The books are also behind you.
Wait. No, Luke had kids, too. Luke's son went,
Luke's son
Dark Road.
was also in the... Luke had... You had Ben Skywalker. You had Anakin Solo... You had Jaina and Jason Solo.
That's what it was.
And Jason Solo was Darth Caedus. Yes, we're going into Star Wars nerdery. And out of that whole series where all of that happened, by the way, the last book was very, very disappointing. They should not let anyone other than Karen Traviss write for Mandalorians. Anyway, just saying.
I haven't been caught up on the books in a very long time. There was a point in 2001 where I was completely caught up. I had read every Star Wars novelization that had been written up until that point. And then I got a different job where I did not have 10 hours, 4 days a week to basically read the entire time, and I got behind quite a bit. But, Bond does not kill Blofeld, although he has the opportunity. He unloads his gun in front of him and says, out of bullets. Symbolic.
Yes, and let's face it, we know it's going to come back to bite him in the ass.
Oh, of course.
But what's going to be interesting is, of course, he gets into the DB5, takes Tracy, Madeline with him, and she does not get riddled with bullets, which means she has to come back in the next movie. And Q says, I thought you were gone. He said, I am. So he did what he intended to do at the end of On Her Majesty's Secret Service.
Ran away with girl.
He ran away with a girl, which he also intended to do with, of course, Vesper Lynd, and was stopped from doing. But now we have to begin the next movie where James Bond is not 007. Or at least he's not officially in the 00 section, so it's going to be interesting.
Well, yeah, they
work that out.
Say, obviously they were able to shut down the security stuff, but they never... I don't think they immediately, because this happened, we're just going to go ahead and reinstate the 00s, even though we had already shut them down.
I think it's pretty obvious, though, that that's going to happen.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, because, let's face it, you have Mallory bringing him in.
Yeah.
And we have all the evidence we need.
Yeah, and the fact that Q was at work, essentially, when Bond came back to get the car.
Yeah.
So I think it's more of a extended vacation thing. I don't think he was indicating that he was out. I think he was indicating that he was taking a vacation, but it could go either way, and we'll have to wait and see.
You know what I'm going to beg for, though? Don't make me wait 3 years. There is no excuse to make us wait 3 years. One, Daniel Craig is not getting any younger. He's not a spring chicken. And there's just no excuse. You can't even give the post-prod excuse. And what we've been side-referencing this entire time is evidence of that. Star Wars. They're going to come out every 2 years.
Yeah.
You want a series of movies that has more post-prod than James Bond? Yes, there is such a thing. It's called Star Wars.
Yes.
And then what's another fantastic example of something you could really do, especially if you're going to do serial concurrent storylines? The Peter Jackson Lord of the Rings approach, where you make all 3 movies at the same time and release them 1 year after another. It's a little more taxing on the actors, yes. However, this is exactly how Sean Connery had to work, basically, because, yeah, they didn't make them concurrently one after another, but you notice Sean Connery's movies came out every year.
Yeah. And I can understand them not necessarily going for the 1 year approach, especially considering how burnt out Daniel Craig was at the end of filming this. Like, just his interviews and stuff, and he tried to, I think he covered it as well as he possibly could, but it was obvious that he was tired at the end of filming this, and when you watch the movie, you can tell, you're like, yeah, that guy would be tired. And he's just pretending to be this guy.
But the other thing is Daniel Craig is one of those guys who does as many of his stunts as he's allowed to do.
Yeah.
And by the way, there's no such thing as someone who does all of their own stunts. Even Jackie Chan doesn't.
Nope.
I have this on a reliable first-hand source from someone who's worked with him.
Yeah. And as they age, they do less and less of their own stunt work as well. And as they get more popular, they do less and less of their own stunt work because the insurance becomes much, much more expensive. And at some point, the studio says, you know what? No, you're not doing that stunt, regardless of whether you want to or not, because we can't afford the insurance for you to do that stunt.
Unless you're a crazy Scientologist who says, I'm going to hang off the side of the plane anyway, and we're just going to film it before anyone can stop me.
Yeah, but then you're like, there's no reasoning with that guy. He literally believes aliens strapped people to volcanoes before the dawn of time. There's no reasoning with this man. You're not going to get through to him. But,
cheers if he gets a reference.
Yeah, no, this movie, start to finish, definitely grabs you. It definitely keeps you attached. I think there are a lot of movies, even good movies, have lull moments, have moments when you can allow your attention to wander, when you could be doing something else, where you could be looking, like, oh, there's a good time to check my Facebook. Here's a good time to clean the house. Here's a good time to do something else. I wouldn't say this movie lets go of you for any length of time to let you do that. This is a movie you're going to want to watch straight through. And that's great. That's fantastic.
Yeah, this is the prime opposite of when we did the list episode, how I described Dr. No, where, yeah, good movie, but I could clean the house while I was watching it.
Yeah.
This is one that's much more along the lines of, say, Octopussy or Goldeneye, where, nope, sitting down, watching the whole thing.
Yeah, definitely. And like I was saying, even the action sequences, which for me are the easiest to kind of tune out of, because it's just them moving really quick and stuff breaking, blah, 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 whatever. No, these action sequences are so well done, you pay attention. You're in the moment. And like I said, there were, in that train scene, I was literally like, here he goes, oh, he smashed into the table. I was like, oh. I was jumping around a bit. I was like, holy geez, this is visceral. This is entertaining. This is fantastic.
And then, of course, we have that car chase, which is basically Formula One. And that's something else that I noticed in this car chase that you don't usually see in James Bond. The only time I've ever seen, I can recall seeing something like this, is when they were driving on ice. And that is, he's drifting. That's just not a driving technique you usually see him use on a paved road. We've seen it on ice, but that's different.
Well, and to be fair, the majority of the cars he's driven, I think, have been four-wheel drive. So you're not going to be doing much drifting in four-wheel drive. The DB10, I'm pretty sure, is
You're not going to be
drive.
Drifting in a Citroen?
Well, in the Citroen, maybe, but it's not going to be a controlled drift, I'll tell you that.
And you're not going to be drifting in a Ford that weighs about 6,000 pounds empty?
He did plenty of drifting in the cello case, though.
He did, but that was on ice.
It was definitely a fantastic car chase. And then we got another great chase scene where he was in the plane, and then in part of a plane, and then in even a smaller part of the plane, and then finally in pretty much just the cockpit of the plane.
And what I find interesting, going back to the product placement that didn't really happen, but when we saw zillions of ads, we see an ad for Land Rover, which features scenes from this chase sequence. the bad guys are driving the Land Rover. That's not the implication you get from the commercial. But the bad guys are driving the Land Rover, which I find effing hilarious.
Yeah, and even then, like, now that I think about it, yeah, those were Land Rovers. It wasn't glaring in your face, like, we're going to make sure that Land Rover takes up 90% of the screen for more than 5 seconds so that you have to read Land Rover. Hey, look, these guys are driving Land Rovers. Why don't we have the characters talk about Land Rover for a minute? It didn't happen that way. It's
Red Rover, let's try to find Land Rover.
It's just, like I said, I didn't even really catch it, implicitly. It was just more of a, oh, okay, yeah, now that you mention it, they were driving Land Rovers. They got to be driving something, right?
Citroen.
Man, those things hold up. Those things hold up well.
It's like a European Honda Civic. Let's face it, you can run those things into the ground. I had a friend who, the last time I saw him, he had 500,000 Ks on his Honda Civic, and it was still going, and it probably still is. By the way, this was 13 years ago.
Yeah, they are definitely built to last, which is awesome.
Unlike more than we can say for most cars that Bond has driven.
I told you to bring it back in one piece, not bring back one piece.
He's so proud of that joke.
He really was. That's what sold it, because by itself, that joke's not that funny. But just Q being so proud of himself that he cracked the joke.
And Ben Whishaw is just such a fine... He is a good actor. I really do like him. I mean, I can see why other people who work with him on other projects have gushed over him. I follow Haley Atwell on social media, and she cannot stop saying good things about him. I can understand why. He just brings life to his character, and he brings so much more than just reading the dialogue. There's a depth to him, and he really puts a very cool new spin where he gets a little bit of Desmond Llewellyn in there while making him completely different.
Yeah.
But he's got just enough of the little bit. It's just, I love what he's done with.
Yeah, I agree, especially now that they're going slightly more. I like the fact that they're kind of finding that middle ground between no gadgets whatsoever and the ridiculousn's that some of the Bond films went with the gadget.
We get a Q lab.
Yeah, we get a Q lab, but what do we see mostly in the Q lab? Guns, which, there's no ghetto blaster in there.
I love ghetto blaster.
Well, the ghetto blaster's awesome, but we're not seeing that level of intricacy. What we're seeing instead is, yes, he's got a watch that explodes, yes, but that's it. It just explodes and tells time, evidently.
So it doesn't have the feature that almost every other James Bond watch has ever had. Some kind of cutting tool.
Yeah, laser,
or it spins into a buzzsaw.
Which I can imagine is completely safe to carry on your wrist. Yeah, basically the watches that do everything except tell time, as IQ would put it.
Yes.
Yeah, so we get that little bit of gadgetry. We get the car, the DB10, that has some gadgets, but they're fairly basic, with the exception of the ejector seat with the self-restraining parachute and everything. That's a little high-tech, but the other thing's a gun that points backwards. All right, you're being chased. You want a gun that points backwards.
And
be better if it was loaded.
The thing that we mentioned in Skyfall, it's the latest thing. It's a radio. It just happens to play music that 007 doesn't like.
Atmosphere. What's this?
I love that. You think it's going to be some kind of gadget or a smoke screen, or that's what I thought it was. It was a smoke screen.
Right.
And then he flips the switch. Oh, God, no.
Reminds me of a joke they cracked in a Family Guy episode where I think Stewie was on a spaceship and he's checking the things. He's like, okay, oxygen supply. He's like, okay, fuel supply, check. Air supply, check.
Oh, no. I'm all out of love. So lost without you.
Exactly.
I apologize to our audience.
It was amusing. But yeah, although I did think the backfire should have been what he ended up using. Because that was really
a fire
that went out the back, as opposed to shooting out the back. But, hey, it worked. It got the job done. Well, sort of. I mean, Hinks was still mad about it. But yeah, Hinks was awesome. Hinks was fantastic.
I did very much like Mr. Hinks, and I thought Bautista did a fantastic job with it. He has certainly come a long way since I first saw him on WCW, I'll tell you that.
Yeah, I don't get into the wrestling thing. So my first experience with him was Drax in Guardians of the Galaxy, and I really dug him in that. I thought, he played up to what the character was, and it was fantastic. That movie is just so good. I just recently rewatched it again, and it's almost like I'd almost forgotten how good it was until I rewatched it. Just the amount of times I found myself busting up laughing out loud, just cracking up. It's a great film. Great film.
But as was Spectre, it exceeded my expectations. I mean, I would have been shocked if I didn't like it. And, of course, I loved it.
Yeah.
Not perfect. I did mention we have a glaring plot hole, but just so much about it was so good. And even the stuff that, in my own head, that I predicted, honestly, okay, you in the audience, you're my fellow Bond nerds. You might have predicted this as well, because we're all Bond nerds. But for the casual Bond fan, I think a lot of surprises are here. I mean, the only one, of course, that wasn't a surprise was that Christoph Waltz played Kylo Ren. But, aside from that, just really, really good film. Sets us up for more, and we have that promise. Because what is the one thing that Blofeld makes an absolute point of multiple times in Spectre? I have killed every woman who means anything to you. And on the bridge, when Bond doesn't kill him, where's Blofeld looking? Not at Bond. He's looking at Madeline.
Yeah. He's kind of making a silent promise that this is going to happen. So
now what's going to be
sorry,
interesting
Madeline.
Is if it is Sorry Madeline or if it's not. What if we turn the world on its head? I think honestly, this would turn the world on its head much more than casting, say, Idris Elba as James Bond. I honestly think the idea of Bond being able to stay in a committed relationship where the woman doesn't die instantly would be more of a shocker than Bond suddenly turning black. I honestly think that.
Yeah, absolutely. It would be very interesting to see how his dynamic would change in a committed relationship. We only have ever gotten to see that for 5 minutes of film.
And even in the books, it has happened in the Gardner novels especially, but even then I don't think it played well. And we'll talk about that eventually when we really want to torture ourselves. You may have noticed we've put off talking about Gardner novels again. I actually have it on our show notes as when we feel like punishing ourselves, we'll talk about the next 4. So, expect it sometime when I really just had a brain fart or something.
Having a masochistic moment, and we decided this is what we're going to do.
Yeah, but it'll happen eventually in the far-off future, because we have lots of ideas. Believe me, I have enough show notes to last us for quite a while in my head. I really do have to write them down, but I do have a lot of them.
That's awesome. We have a great time doing this, and we're glad that the listeners keep coming back. Thank you all for being out there, for listening to our show. Don't forget to drop us a line. Let us know how you feel. If you've seen Spectre, obviously if you're hearing this part right now and haven't paused it way back when we said to, you should have already seen Spectre. We want to hear your thoughts on it too. Hit us up on our Facebook page. You can go to facebook.com/Her Majesty's Pod. You can tweet at us at Her Majesty's Pod. You can comment on this episode on our website at hermajestyspod.com. You can email us.
You can email me directly at ziggy@cinemaontherocks.com. You can tweet at me directly at cinemaotr.
You can tweet at me at Eric J. Dewey, and you can email me at eric@foureyedradio.com. And so we're accessible. We're out there. We like to interact with you guys, so please drop us a line. Let us know what you think of Spectre. Let us know what you think of what we think of Spectre. And let us know what you think is coming next for Bond.
Indeed. But in the meantime, we thank you very much for joining us for our look at the latest James Bond movie, which means that now when we do list episodes, we cannot do the 23 official Eon films. It is now 24 official Eon films. And Never Say Never Again.
And that one.
Because I love to torture Eric.
Evidently.
With chickens.
I love chickens, though.
I know. So, thank you very much for joining us for this discussion. We will be back again with another episode in a couple of weeks. In the meantime, I'm Ziggy Berkeley.
And I'm Eric Dewey.
And you have been listening to Her Majesty's Secret Podcast, only on the Four-Eyed Radio Network.
This has been another great presentation by the Four-Eyed Radio Network. You can find more information at foureyedradio.com.